I always say reserve the right to change your mind. Like, it can
I love
change
that.
over the
Yeah.
years. And I think you'll figure it out more and more the more you test it out and interrogate it. You'll be like, oh, maybe actually that wasn't what I meant when I was trying to articulate this feeling. Maybe I actually mean this. We as humans are like evolutionary. We don't stay the same. So I wouldn't expect someone to stay the same throughout their whole career. That it's okay to evolve.
This episode with Rosanna is quite special for me. We talked about storytelling, we talked about why, and I even used her time to my own benefit and talk about the podcast and why I do it. I think this is an extremely important episode, and Rosanna is so amazing to talk with. I hope you like it. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Sound Connections podcast. Today we have Rosanna on the podcast. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So we met, I can't remember how long ago, I think 6 weeks ago, and we talked about PR, we talked about the podcasts. You had questions about what we do, and I had about you, and it was a really interesting conversation, very lovely. And one of the things that the podcast have been focusing on for a long time, and will continue focusing on, is innovation and entrepreneurship in the music industry. But one of the things that we haven't talked too much about, which is kind of weird, is artists. And it's also about storytelling. It's about sort of also to center things around the main person who is delivering the worth to the industry. And we're going to talk about that today. We're also going to talk about branding and PR for companies in the music space. So I'm looking very much forward to this, Rosanna. But before we sort of start the podcast, could you set the scene and explain who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yes. My name's Rosanna. I'm based in London, here in the UK, and I'm an impact-led storyteller. I like to say that instead of a publicist or like a comms expert, I really believe in impactful stories and quality over quantity.
Yeah. Oh, there's already there's so many things to dissect because
Sorry.
because I'm a storyteller as well in a different way, but I haven't always been aware. And one of my biggest mistakes in my career that I still do to that day is having quantity over quality, not because I choose to do that, just because I don't choose to do the opposite. I don't choose, I don't consciously choose quality to be the most important thing in the process. And I've had my fair share of consequences of that, which is interesting. So hopefully I'll understand how I've been an idiot in the past by having this conversation. That I always like that. No, jokes aside, can you dissect what do you mean by impact-led storytelling?
Impact-led means it being impactful, basically, for whoever we're helping tell their story. So essentially that could mean different things, but we want to share a story that people remember and a story that lasts, a story that they can build on and build a career from, versus like, oh, there's a new single and it's about this. Oh, there's a new album, it's about this. Oh, we have this news piece, yay. So impact-led meaning it's something that is long-lasting and can be built upon for the years to come.
Yeah, so the same way, for example, that you would work with now I'll take it from the entrepreneurship side, and we do consultancy and Amplitude for early-stage startups, is about saying, okay, this is what you say you're going to do. Let's go back to the basics. What's the market? What's your problem you're solving? What's your solution? Sort of how do you want to phrase a narrative? How do you want to place yourself? What's sort of the branding going forward towards investors? And this is sort of course, my world, but you can draw parallels to anything within storytelling to that, I guess.
Absolutely. We do the same thing with the story. Yeah. It's like, break it down, take it back to the very basics. Why are you doing this? What's your why? If you don't have a compelling why, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. Like, what are you building everything out of? Like, what is the thing that you reflect back on when on the hard days, If you don't know why you're doing something, it's going to be very hard to continue and push down an avenue without having those pillars in place.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. Like the same way, I'm just taking it back to sort of my domain. If you don't have a why and you entirely focus on the how, whenever a pivot is necessary, whenever a big change is necessary, you have a hard time doing it because you've been so focused on the how, rather than the why. And the why is the base of everything you do, and the how can change based on having a why that stands not still, but is the anchor. And then you have the freedom to change things. Okay, let's not go into all the gold first. First thing, we need to understand a bit where you come from when you talk about impact storytelling. You talk about Morena Coms, which is your company.
Yeah.
Could you, in a couple of minutes, just explain to me how your career path taking you to where you're at now?
Yeah, sure. So I have always loved music. And when I was getting to that point in school where you either do like sixth form or college, I applied to a performing arts school called the Brit School. And I applied, I auditioned, and I got into their music sector. So that was the equivalent of doing 3 A-levels in music. And I was at the Brit School. It was fantastic. It was one of the best educational experiences I've ever received and ever undergone. And by the time I had got to the end of my time with Brit, I was kind of done with education. So I needed a job, and I had met, through difficult circumstances in my life, I'd met someone who worked in the music industry called Angie Jenkinson. And she helped send my CV to one of her best friends. And I ended up getting an interview for an internship at Universal, which was really exciting. The label was Mercury Records. I ended up getting the internship, working my butt off. I remember the head of press saying to me, "You're the best intern we've ever had." And I remember being like, great, let's keep going. And by the end of that internship year, I actually had 3 job offers as well. So I had one from Polydor, one from Mercury, and one from a regional PR company as well. And then, I took the job at Mercury, which turned into Virgin EMI when it merged with EMI. And I was at Universal Music for just over 6 years in total before I moved to Apple to run the PR for Apple Music in the UK and Europe. And I was doing that role for 2 years before moving to Platoon, which is a company that Apple had acquired in 2018. And I was their artist communications lead there. So overseeing stuff in like South Africa to New York and LA, which was really exciting and a massive role and a big learning experience.
Yeah.
And simultaneously working at Platoon, I also launched my own company.
Ambitious.
Yeah. And so, well, it was a pandemic, so hey.
Yeah.
So I also launched Morena Coms, as it's known now. And we started working with independent artists. I had a non-compete basically that was signed off by the head of Apple Music, which was like a really crazy thing to go to the head of Apple Music and be like, "Hey, want to launch this business?" But he was like really encouraging actually, which was incredible. And then I ended up leaving Platoon and going all in on Morena Coms, where we deliver boutique PR services and bespoke campaigns.
Amazing. Well, it's quite an impressive career you've had in a very, very few years. So I'm very excited to have this talk today. Okay, let's sort of start at the basics. And I think most of this talk today is going to be about artists, and I'll try to throw it back into the narrative of where I come from. So entrepreneurs and innovators listening to this conversation also can have a clear idea of how to draw learnings from it. Is that okay that I'll do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited.
So when you talk about an artist and we talk about PR, we've already touched why, and you can expand on that point or some different point, but what is the most important thing that you need to tackle in an artist coming to you for services?
It is the why. We have a lot of artists coming, like emailing, DMing as well, because I run something called the Indie Artist Club as well, which is helping artists in the early stages of their career. And a lot of the music is good, like people have like some sort of bio, like maybe they've used the EPK that we provide or they've created an EPK, like things are good, maybe the branding is like, getting in place, but sometimes their why is, you should listen to my music because it's good. And it's so hard to work with that. It's like, well, just listen because it's good and I want to build my streams. It's like, well, why did you start making music in the first place? Who are you trying to speak to with your music? What are you trying to say with your music? And when they have these things in place, that then informs their branding and how they speak on social media, the tone of voice. They know who they're speaking to, and everything becomes way more cohesive.
I think I don't want to take technology too much into this conversation, but I think it's very appropriate. We work a lot with AI, and we also have doing a lot of research and development within generative music, and some of the tests we're doing is much further than people believe and think. And
well, what I've seen, like when I said to you, I am shook by what you're doing. Like,
yeah.
I'm sad that I'm speaking to you really, and not your AI host.
We should have said that. Actually, we had a guest last week that had an AI host join in on the conversation. You missed out on that. Okay. But what I'm trying to say is that music, not anytime soon, but already now within certain aspects of music, have already come to the place where it's like in the 20 to 10% percentile of music out there when it comes to quality in the aspect of like musicality, like production elements, melody, lyric composition, quality of vocals, whatever. And this is going to happen so much more. I believe, and I have a theory because I talk with a lot of very clever people that I just try to sort of make conclusions based on what they say, is that there's going to be a very big need for interhuman connectivity very soon, much more so than there's been before. And what is going to differentiate an artist from AI-generated music is not going to be so much the actual music, but rather the connection that you provide through your music. And the why has always been important, but I believe that within 12 months from now, the why is going to be essential for you to have any relevance in the market. And there's no longer going to be a space for you just being good at music.
Absolutely. It's that authenticity. It's you showing up as who you are. And honestly, we don't work with anyone who doesn't have a good why. Because for me, it's essential as a publicist, but I definitely see it coming to the forefront more and more with companies and like corporate clients that we're speaking to as well. That why has to be so strong.
I know we don't shout out, other podcast hosts or authors on the podcast, but like I read Simon Sinek's Start With Why, who's a brilliant thinker in this space. And that sort of transformed how I work because I've always had a subconscious understanding what my why was. But there's a very big difference when you start making it concrete and out of the world. Because I believe that finding your why can fundamentally change your how. And it can also filter out the noise around what you do so you have the opportunity to center exactly on what you should focus on. And now I'm putting, now I'm, saying things on your behalf, but assuming what I said was correct, could you maybe speak a bit about the practical implications of finding and defining your why?
It creates a roadmap and a strategy. Like if you can articulate it well, people are going to come on board pretty much immediately if it's compelling enough. As a publicist and a storyteller, I can help refine language. But if it's compelling enough, like everything else falls into place. Branding, colors, like audience, like I don't know if you remember like back in the day when Squarespace was launching, but there was a color called millennial pink. And it was basically a color that increased conversion rates. Like psychologically, people just really enjoyed this millennial pink color, and it actually increased conversion rates into like people signing up to Squarespace and stuff like that. Like, so there's there's amazing things that you can look into when you know your why and it informs who you're speaking to. It informs how you speak, and it informs like the colors and the typeface, like the fonts and stuff like that, and the imagery that you use. More people will come on board quicker than if you didn't have that.
That makes sense. Okay, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I hope it's okay. I haven't cleared this with you.
Okay.
I would love to do a live exercise on the podcast with you, talking about the why of the podcast. And can you guide me through it? I have not prepared for this either.
All right, let's do it.
I'm putting us in let's call it a client client PR relationship right now, because I believe we can dissect it afterwards. So sorry, I'm putting you in the spot. But let's assume I just showed up on a Zoom call.
You just kept trying to get free PR services.
Yes.
Is this a whole ruse? Will this ever go out?
I am a genius. Okay.
You are.
All right, let's try to do it. That was not the intention, but I think there's some learnings we can get from this. So I'm a client. I show up. Hey, I'm Jacob. I run the Sound Connection podcast. And then we can start talking about why.
Yeah. So I basically have a whole questionnaire that I go through with clients when I do a consultation.
If you don't want to use that, we can. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a formula. It's like, there's reasons behind each question. And we get to the why more and more, and we talk about like what you are okay with talking about, what you're not okay with talking about. It's a formula. So if we are going to bring it back into like the really simple terms of the podcast, I'd ask you to tell me like why you do it, and then interrogate you about that a little bit more and refine it more with you. So if you want to tell me why, without having all of the pre-questions that I have before it.
Yep. Yeah.
In order to interrogate you.
Yep.
Let's just go. So you tell me your why, and I'm going to ask some questions that kind of makes you think more about that.
Yeah.
And it will either reinforce it or help you like update the language around it.
Okay, so I'll try. Again, I haven't prepared. So I think there's several points to this. I think the primary, most internal purpose of why I do the podcast is that I've been listening to podcasts for 10, 15 years. This is how I learn. And I have not found a podcast in the music industry space mixed with innovation that I feel like speak to the way that I learn. And that's sort of the base. Then there's multiple elements on top of it. I believe that people are oftentimes in the same space as me, where the music industry can be incredibly hard to navigate. And I've had access to many years with great mentors, but still then it's been hard to understand the full picture of the music industry. And I'm trying to use that podcast for my own egotistical reasons to understand those, but also share it. On top of that, there's sort of that's a wrong word because it sounds wrong, ulterior motive, where there's a financial incentive on top of it.
Yeah.
That we have a business we're growing, and the branding and exposure that the podcast gives is very beneficial. And so that's both personal brand and business brand. So that's sort of the why.
Okay, love it. So that is kind of your business why as well. So we would need that to tell your story, that last point. Okay, something about me is I'm very direct with clients as well. So I'm just going to speak how I speak.
I love it.
All I heard on the first point was me. Your why is about you and how you learn. The second was saying, I think people might learn the way I do. But what really needs to happen is you to define how you learn, because I learn through storytelling. That engaged me the most in school. If someone told me a formula or like a sum or whatever, great. If you told me a story of someone buying apples and blah, 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 and I can visualize it and visualize the story, it goes in and stays there. So if you're trying to articulate something like that, it's better to talk about ways of learning and how maybe bring in some personal elements that you might want to share, you might not want to, about how, and bring in some data as well, because you love data. 40% of people learn better by this style. And I wanted
brilliant.
to create a podcast that could help people the way this style of learning has helped me. Just reframing it a little bit instead of saying like, oh, I did this because I didn't see this and I wanted this. And then the secondary being other people might find this useful. Actually, what you're doing is really powerful and you're downplaying it.
Yeah. But let me dissect the first part again, because that's a brilliant comment. So we had a conversation before we started the podcast, and we talked a bit about ADHD, and we also talked about dyslexia. I also have I would call it mild dyslexia, but enough for it to be very, very difficult for me to handle both ADHD and the dyslexia, which basically means it costs a lot of energy for me to read articles. And the music industry information flow right now is primarily built on that. Even when you go to conferences, I don't want to offend anyone, most of what's said from the stages is pretty useless. Because it never really goes into the depth that it deserves. There's a lot of political elements to on a conference setting. Like, people can say something, people can't say something. It's very public. People don't know each other. You never get to the place where I get the things that I don't already know to some degree. And of course, I know probably more than most. So to dissect the first point is, because of my, let's call it, disabilities in receiving information from the most used media in the music industry, I had issues with getting the information that I need to build my business upon. Is that it? Was it a good dissection?
So much better. Yeah, really, so much better. And I think just taking the I out of the conversation, like, you can bring that in later, but why does this exist? This exists to be a different format of learning. Because I've discovered that, there's people like me that learn in this way and gain information in another way. Like, I recently posted about my dad. Like, my dad sends me articles, hundreds of articles. Like, just sends me links to articles or PDFs or whatever. And I actually ended up saying to him, look, Dad, you like, I can't read at the rate that you read. Like, I actually don't read what you send me as much as I'd want to and want to please you. I struggle with it. And he started sending me voice notes of him reading the articles to me. And I've been able to listen to these articles that he thought might be helpful for me and my business, because he has changed the way that I am able to receive the information. And I think that's what you're doing with this podcast, and it's lovely. So articulating that better would help your why.
Oh, that's amazing. I can already feel like I'm not saying this just to say it, like a deeper sense of purpose with my words, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Let's criticize this more. We don't need to link it too long to it, but I love this, and I get free PR training, so it's great.
Yeah, I know. Lucky you.
All right, let's address some more points in what you heard.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Oh, good.
Let's address some more
do you
points
have more criticism that I can address right now?
No, do you know what? I think that's a good starting point, because I think once you take that away and work on that, then we can go to the next level if needs be. But think about, like, if you have 30 seconds or a minute to talk to someone in an elevator, those points that you raised took ages. And the third one was irrelevant to telling the story of the podcast. So, and that was a business case, which is great. We all have businesses. We all need to live and make money and pay rent. Your audience doesn't really need to know that. They kind of already know that when they, if you hear an ad or a sponsorship or something, people are very understanding that podcasts need funding in order to run and support the hosts. So that, scrap that part. You definitely, for business, keep it, but for your storytelling, not needed. I would just frame it like, go into the research, because you are research-led and research-driven, how many people learn through like audio or storytelling? Maybe look up the increase in listening to audiobooks or just podcasts in general, and then apply it to what you're doing with the podcast, basically, and say how you're meeting a need and not meeting your own need. But you can bring your personal story into it to make it more compelling afterwards.
That's amazing. One of the fun things with doing these exercises, and we'll sort of go over to other things now, is I do a lot of this, similar work as you're doing with me right now for clients within sort of, we have a very singular service we provide, which is investment readiness. Like, what kind of story would you tell based on your business that would increase the chances of investors resonating with your message? That's what we take. And there's, of course, elements of this, maybe not down to the personal level that we're doing right now, but that, consistently we've seen help increase the chances of a business getting funding. The interesting thing is when you do these exercises in yourself, it's incredibly hard because
it is.
And I believe I can be brilliant doing this for other companies, but I need outside help all the time in order to do it for myself.
Yeah.
But I think there's an element of, people most of the time not being able to be non-biased or listening to things for the first time and sort of sorting through the ingrained subconscious explanations to why you say what you do. So amazing. Okay. We've gone
It's
through
an art.
the free training. Thank you so much. And now,
what's next on the list?
so how practically would that sort of be? Okay, you have an artist that's found the why to some degree. How would you go about the next steps?
So again, we do like a formulaic questionnaire where I ask a number of questions to help define and then refine their story. We make sure that these updated comments and anecdotes and stories are in their bio. So we make sure the bio is up to date, and then we write the press release essentially. So in the questionnaire is like our questions about the music and the project as well, and who they sound most similar to, although everyone is different and everyone has an original sound. Like, if someone were to say you sound similar to someone else, who would that be? Who are your influences? And that goes in the bio and the press release and stuff like that. So everything is built off the why and this questionnaire. After the why, everything else gets built out, and then it informs all of the press materials.
Yeah. And what is the importance of press in modern day and age? Could you walk me through the sort of the impact for both the artist and external stakeholders through doing this press outreach?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of importance in doing press at the right time. So I wouldn't just say like PR and press is just important, full stop. Because I don't believe that is like an answer for across the board. I think press is important in the right timing and with the right story. So I wouldn't do press for the sake of it or encourage someone to do PR if I didn't feel they were ready for it or needed it at a moment in their career. But when it is the right timing, press is great because it feeds in to the big marketing funnel. So press is one of three marketing buckets. It's earned media. It's based on sentiment, testimonial, reviews, etc. It can't be bought. That's advertorial. If you are paying to be covered on a website or in a magazine, that is paid advertising and advertorial. The other buckets are owned media. So if you have an email list or a WhatsApp group or something that you own, you don't own your social media. That's owned by Meta or Twitter or whoever. But if you convert someone from your social media into an email list, that is data that you own. and then the other one is paid as. I'm saying this in layman's terms, so like I can bring everyone up to speed as well for the podcast. I know you know, but yeah, paid like, you know, ads, out of home, etc., etc. So earned media, PR, feeds in to those other buckets as well. They work in tandem, they work hand in hand. If you go all in on PR and don't focus on, you know, your own audience and making sure they know exactly what you're doing and keeping them warm, and you don't put ad spend or any advertising, it may not do as well. But PR in general, like, it helps the other two as well. So if you get like good endorsements from a publication or an outlet, then you can go back to your owned list and say, oh, so and so said I'm really cool, and they'll be like, oh, okay, they think you're cool. Same with paid. You can put paid spend behind articles and stuff like that, or use it to inform ads as well. Like, take quotes from articles, pop them in an ad. That's why, you know, when you see billboards and stuff, there'll be 5-star reviews from you know, the Guardian or whatever it is. It helps inform that decision to listen to the music, essentially, that endorsement. So it's very powerful.
Yeah, and then it's, again, we'll touch upon that about also make sure you are consistent over a long time, right? You know, because one thing is having a great story, but keeping that story for a long time, I guess, is also important. Could you dissect that a bit?
Yes, it's super important. I always like to have like as long a timeline as possible. We tend not to take on one-off singles for artists unless I think the music is shit hot and there's like stuff in the pipeline, but it's TBC, but coming like within the few months. But yeah, having a start-stop campaign is really tough because you are, you know, let's go. And it takes, you know, when you turn on an engine and have to, you know, it takes effort to start to get something moving, and then you have to put the brakes on it. Then you have to do that effort again to get it moving. So sometimes you just feel like you're in the same spot and rebuilding. And we've also had issues with artists where they're a certain genre, they're releasing a song in a certain genre. I've heard the EP or the mixtape or whatever it is. Yes, great. And then they're like, oh, actually, I want to add in this song, and it's like a different genre. And then we started the car moving in one direction, then we have to go the other direction because they want to do this, which is fine. You know, I tell everyone up front, like I've told you with, you know, the feedback, this is not what I'd advise, or this is what I'd advise, and give them, you know, my free advice. And then I say, but I also say, this is just advice. You have to do what gives you peace. And whatever you decide, I back you all the way. So, you know, we have the conversation, and then whatever they decide, they won't hear from me again on my thoughts or opinions because they've made a decision, so I'm going to back them. It's not useful for me to be like, oh, well, I said this. And so, like, we can have that at the end, you know, conversation down the line and say, you know, let's review then if this hasn't gone as to plan, like what we could have done differently. But there is no point me being like moody along the way or, you know, not supportive of an artist. I just think, what's the point?
I think there's so many parallels to be drawn to entrepreneurship here, and I'm just trying to make it and get your comments on it. So I see a lot of pitch decks and I see a lot of pitches and a lot of founders, and, you know, 1 out of 3, I would say, has a narrative like, I'm just going to take a hypothetical example. We're an artist. We're a company that provides marketing service for artists, and then if they do really well, we'll also sign them as management and promote a tour for them. So it's within the same realm of service, but it's also in completely different business, completely different responsibility. And where, you know, again, most of the people I talk with is positioning the well for investors, but investors also know this, and I believe it to consistently be a big turnoff when you have plans of driving your car in many different directions and not having one goal to go towards, and then say, okay, now we've come here, now we can evaluate where to drive to now, but not having that conflicting Google Maps with too many stops and never really getting to real value. Now I'm putting a lot of conclusions in my words, but if you agree, could you nuance what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's really tough because, Morena Coms also is a vehicle. I would say there's two cars, and
Yeah.
they're not gonna be as powerful as one car moving in one direction, but maybe they're mopeds. Who knows?
Yeah.
Let's just open it up because, as I said, we deliver boutique PR services and bespoke campaigns. I've done PR for 12 years now, and I really enjoy telling stories in the right way. But I also started the Indie Artist Club to equip people artists starting out. And I would like to see that turn into a business that, brings back income. At the minute, it's a labor of love and I really enjoy doing it, but it's kind of taken off like more and more. And I'm like, okay, let's make this, like, if I'm dedicating so much time and more time, it has to have a return on my time investment and my personal investment. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just knowing that there's two different plans there. There's two different business plans. And that's okay for each of those. But my overall business plan, and it is like, it sounds funny when you say it to other entrepreneurs, because I am by nature an entrepreneur. I was the one outside my house, like, trying to sell stuff, like, when I was a kid and stuff like that. I've always been an entrepreneur, and I love just starting and creating things. But my business plan is not based on finances. It's based on health and happiness, and being able to be in control of my schedule, being able to be, like, financially free from worry, and being as healthy as I possibly can. And it's kind of anti like that capital gains kind of thing that we live in. So I'm in an entrepreneurs cohort, and there's like loads of us. It's called Opus Network, and it's brilliant. But a lot of it is based on like VC funding and like pitch decks and all of that, like funding rounds and all of that. And I'm just like, I'm switched off to it because it's not my goal, and that's okay.
Yeah. This is one of the things I contemplate a lot on as well, because I am, I would say to some degree, I'm an anti-materialist. I'm not really, but like I have very, very little value attached to physical belongings.
Yeah.
And besides the comfort of having a house that can accommodate my family in a good neighborhood, I don't have any ambitions beyond that. But again, as an entrepreneur, we have 20 investors. We have, super angels. We're sort of going into the VC space now. I have this side of a business that is required to make impact, and there's financial expectations for that. But what I do find is I don't really find it conflicting, because at the end of the day, my goal, and I haven't formulated this either, and we won't take a new training session for free now, but like it doesn't feel like it conflicts with my why. And what I think my why is, which I haven't worked on too much, so I'm sorry, is that I'm obsessed with leaving an impact, not so much a legacy, but an impact. I want to make things that changes circumstances for others, and that's what I find satisfaction for. And I know you would grill me on this, but like at least that's the level I'm working at.
Honestly,
which is interesting.
That's
is you can have, okay, that's good. Yeah, because you can do something that seems somewhat conflicting on the surface level to what you actually do, but very well might not be. In your case, how would you dissect that this is not conflicting from you, like you having a goal of happiness and health, and then doing an entrepreneur's journey, which is very difficult, and you have financial gains and goals you need to live up to?
Honestly, it's the same as you, and I don't have like investors. Like, it's all self-funded, self-started. Like, so I would say it's you, but less pressure. But I like that you don't feel the pressure, which is great. I don't feel the need to grow exponentially at XYZ rate. Like, I'm very much happy growing at the rate that the business is meant to grow, and like having the income that we are having at the minute and building on that. Like, it's very nice and living comfortably. But I'm also so ambitious in terms of work. I'm such a hard worker. I love just like sinking my teeth into like challenging projects and creating things again to leave an impact, like the Indie Artist Club, and helping artists who've had really bad experiences with PRs to know what to expect when they do engage someone in a campaign, that they should be receiving a press update every week, like the bare minimum that you should expect. So what I always do is strive for excellence, and I'm trying to teach these people starting out what that looks like in the music industry as well.
I'm gonna take a small tangent, and I'm gonna give you a compliment while doing it, and that is
okay, great.
When we talked last, I think we talked for 35 minutes, and I think I remember I said sorry a lot of times because I talked a lot about myself, and I usually don't do that in a setting where that's not the agenda. And I thought about afterwards, and also simultaneously now while I'm talking to you, when I talk a lot about myself, which I usually don't do, what is it the thing that I sense makes that happen? And obviously, smile on your face helps, but I think it's when you are a good storyteller, you also inspire people to open up and attach, if that makes sense. When you tell a clear story through who you are, and sometimes it's not even outspoken, it's just having words with clarity that are consistent, that makes people, including me, comfortable to open up about myself and to draw a narrative to that. That's the same mission of an artist, right? The real impact, and you would know this more than me, but like my assumption of the real impact of an artist most of the times is having people attach their lives onto your words, to have this resonance between who they are and how they feel and what you express. And that is the ultimate human connection we can have, is when we resonate, not necessarily emotions, but resonate this subconscious, I don't know how to formulate this, but like the interhuman connectivity.
Yeah. Oh, I honestly, that's such a compliment. So thank you. I try to be impeccable with my word. That's actually in a book that I'm reading at the moment called The 4 Agreements that my business coach gave to me. And it's about making all of your words full of worth and not detrimental or not life-giving. Perhaps that's a bit too airy-fairy for you, but I try to be as intentional as possible with what I say.
Yeah, and I'll give you a tiny bit of a shout out, because you do run an artist course in your Morena Coms, where I guess this is one of the things you speak with artists about, and I think it could be really interesting for people to go into your website and see sort of what your services are, including that.
Thank you.
But maybe I'll just take a tiny bit back and talk about myself, because I'm assuming you've given me the permission now. You said a point about not having the pressure from investors, which is really, really interesting. And because I have maybe not as clearly defined a why, but a pretty good sense of why, of the impact, I can also sort of distance myself from the expectations of investors, or what might be perceived the expectations. And let me explain you why. Because I'm a very practical person, but I do understand nuances of the unspoken still. And the way that I look at investors are that if they're a professional investor, they invest in a company from a portfolio mindset, which means they invest in a potentially good business, in a potentially good founder. And the statistics behind that is not every single investment can work out. And you need to look at through a statistics perspective. They're going to return on the investment based on multiple investments. Some of them are going to lose money. Some of them are going to make more money. And the whole game is have, at the end of the day, have a higher multiple, have more earnings than what you spent. Yeah. And so because I have a pretty clear sense of why I do it, and I also explain it to investors, I no longer feel the pressure of the only thing that I can change is how hard and how intentionally I work. The outcome I cannot control just based on mere wishes. And therefore, I can distance myself from the pressures of investors' expectations. And I think that could also be maybe drawn parallel to artists, that if you have a strong enough why, the expectations of your partners, your label, your manager, even though it's important, you need to distance yourself a tiny bit away from the outcome. Does that make sense?
It's tying artists to metrics is really detrimental to mental health and creativity.
Yeah.
And I think it's fantastic that you're able to rationalize, like, I'm part of a portfolio, I do my best, and this is the business plan, this is the why, we're following this, we'll change the how if needs be. And be like, I can't change that outcome. I'm a bit of like a warrior. If someone invests in me, I'm like, oh my gosh, how soon can I pay them back? If someone lends me money, I'm like, okay, how quick can I get rid of this debt? That's the type of personality that I have, because I don't like to have anything hanging over me. So it's brilliant to hear that you're just like, I understand. I can still do my work, which is lovely. But for artists, when they tie themselves to metrics or have the pressure of tying themselves to metrics and deliverables, it does stunt creativity, and it is not nice to see.
Yeah. No, I agree so much. And that's a whole episode in itself about external expectations and how they might change your trajectory in a way that's not helpful. But I think that the essence of what we're talking about is you need a strong why and you need to stick to it. We're sort of nearing the end of the episode, and I would love this to going on for 2 hours, but I think this format of podcasting also have its limits. What do you believe? I'm going to go back to one of the things I commented on first, new technologies.
Yeah.
Because artists and business that you work with needs to operate in a space that's through a lot of disruption right now. What is the best way to navigate this new technology, this new disruption from a storytelling perspective? I know we've talked about why, but besides the why, how can you go about preparing yourself in your storytelling for what's to come?
Do you mean in terms of AI?
Maybe AI is a thing, changing ways of people consuming content, or
right.
Yeah.
Well, I also have a digital marketing background, and what I have learned and what I firmly believe in is stick to one platform and do it well. And that's not to say you can't throw up content or ideas on other platforms just to test them out. But if you stick to one thing and do it well, it enables you to take a lot of learnings from there, increase that, and maybe open up time to then move on to another platform. I would encourage an artist or a company to be present on the platform where their potential clients are or potential audience is. So for companies that are trying to gain business, LinkedIn. For artists with like an older demographic, perhaps it's Instagram versus TikTok, which has more of like a hooky, snippy kind of thing, maybe like trendy dance stuff as well. And then just one thing and do it well. And that's where you can hammer home. And your why, I always say reserve the right to change your mind. Like, it can change over the years. Yeah. And I think you'll figure it out more and more the more you test it out and interrogate it. You'll be like, oh, maybe actually that wasn't what I meant when I was trying to articulate this feeling. Maybe I actually mean this. So just because you've said it once doesn't mean you have to die on a hill over it. Reserve the right to change your mind and change things up. We as humans are like evolutionary. We don't stay the same. So I wouldn't expect someone to stay the same throughout their whole career. That it's okay to evolve.
No, I love that. It's a phrase I've used for years. Reserve the right to change my mind. It's one of my favorite podcasts that I used to listen to. The host said that and they said it consistently and often because they allow themselves to have conversations that were controversial, but also not put themselves in a place where they need to stick to everything they discuss. And not because you should have standpoints you change, but in order to have free conversations or give yourself the permissions and access to communicate to audience is like, I'm also on a journey and figure out what I stand for and how I present myself. And that's beautiful. Rosanna, it's been great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
I hope that people check out Morena Coms. I know you're also doing exciting projects with clothing. You have some amazing clients that we hope to see on the podcast at one point. And I believe that the storytelling aspect of what we do is essential. At the end of the day, artists are storytellers. And if the businesses representing artists don't know how to tell their own stories, you're probably doing yourself a disfavor. And I believe even more with the advancement of technology, strong interhuman connectivity based on clear, intentional storytelling is going to be the way forward. We're not going to stand out from the noise unless we know how to do that. And
absolutely,
what you do, I believe, is the base of having that successful differentiation.
Thank you, Jacob. That's really kind. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.